We are here today to honor a civilization that remade the world, a religion that originated in the sands but lighted up the whole world. Islam is not a religion, it is a way of life, a revolution of the soul, intellect, and society. Out of the Arabian sands emerged a light that shone in the farthest points of the world, a light of justice, knowledge, unity, and peace. The history of Islam is one of change, from darkness to light, from fragmentation to unity, from ignorance to knowledge. Let us look at the pillars that have made this history so great and how they inspire us today. All great changes in human history start with an awakening, that moment that touches the heart and opens the eyes of mankind. For Islam, that moment was the power of revelation. At a time when the world was torn apart by ignorance, tyranny, and superstition, a message from God came down to rouse the human conscience. It did not start with the sword or with riches, but with a word: read. That one directive was filled with a cosmos of meaning. It was not so much an order to repeat, but a call to mind to study and to transcend the shackles of unawareness. Under the cover of night, when the desert winds caressed the sands, the initial revelation gave birth to a new age, an age of illumination in the light of the Creator's language. The message stated that knowledge was holy, that the human mind was a blessing, and that truth was worth the pursuit regardless of cost. Prior to this epiphany, the world had mostly lost its spiritual bearing. Tribal conflict, idolatry, and injustice governed the earth. The weak were oppressed by the powerful, and ignorance governed the hearts of men. But with revelation came reform, not a revolution of blood, but of faith. It taught that there exists but one God, and that all human being, no matter birth or station, is equal in the sight of Him. This plain but mighty truth shook to their core the foundations of the old world. The discovery did not only appeal to the intellect, it appealed to the conscience. It provided meaning to the lost, strength to the frightened, and illumination to the lost. It redefined human dignity, calling individuals to do justice, show mercy, and pursue truth in all things. It made common people become great leaders, thinkers, and servants of mankind. By the force of revelation, cognition became adoration. To learn about the world was to marvel at the design of the Creator, to write, to teach, to ponder. All were transformed into acts of worship. Such divine instruction raised study to the highest virtue and paved the way for the great civilization that would follow. It motivated generations to construct libraries, to translate the earliest manuscripts, and to push the frontiers of science and philosophy, all in the quest for comprehending words once heard in the cave of Hira. The revelation was not only an appeal to faith, an appeal to action. Business action. It invited people to transcend ignorance and arrogance, to employ reason and reflection as instruments of illumination. It was a reminder that knowledge and faith are not adversaries, but fellow travelers on the same path to truth. So the power of revelation became the essence of Islam's greatness, the fuel that ignited the lamp of civilization. It united a loose people into a strong community, fueled by knowledge, illuminated by wisdom, and reinforced by faith. And even today, that very first word, read, resonates across time, summoning every believer to awaken the mind, cleanse the soul, and perpetuate the eternal light of understanding. When the light of revelation shone upon the hearts of men, it created something much larger than political power or territorial gain. It kindled a civilization founded upon knowledge. Islam instructed that the pursuit of knowledge was not for the privileged few, but an obligation for all believers. The world had never known such a movement, where intellect and faith went hand in hand and where pursuit of truth was worship. Out of the deserts of Arabia came a civilization that used the pen more than the sword. It took only a few centuries for the cities which had been silent before to ring out with the activity of scholars, poets, and thinkers. Baghdad, Damascus, Cordoba, Cairo, and Samarkand became beacons in the firmament of learning. These were not just cities, these were world universities available to all who wanted to learn, no matter what the language or background. Here in these schools of learning, knowledge had no bounds. Mathematics, medicine, astronomy, chemistry, philosophy, literature, and architecture all bloomed under the umbrella of faith. Scholars translated ancient Greece, Persia, India, and Rome's works, saving them for posterity. But that was not enough. They questioned, tested, and built upon those concepts, and in doing so gave rise to discoveries that would go on to energize the European Renaissance. They constructed observatories in which stars were mapped and analyzed with precision. They created hospitals that healed the body and soul alike, with the use of segregated wards, professional physicians, and elaborate medical texts. They surveyed the earth, mapped the sky, and developed tools that escorted travelers over oceans and deserts. The decimal system, algebra, optics, surgical tools, and even the notion of a scientific laboratory all originated from the genius of Islamic civilization. But the greatness of this period lay not in its inventions. It lay in its spirit of wonder. Scholars felt that comprehending creation was a means of glorifying the Creator. Each equation, each experiment, each discovery reflected divine order. Faith did not stifle the mind, it freed it. Fostered questioning, reasoning, and reflection, not as disobedience but as devotion. Here, education was universal, for men and women, for the poor and the rich. Libraries contained millions of books, and students came from far-off lands to learn under the great scholars. Baghdad's paper mills produced manuscripts by the thousands, spreading knowledge to all who sought it. The scholar's ink was holier than the warrior's blood, as it determined the fate of nations without spilling a single drop. This flowering of knowledge turned Islam into a world power, not through conquest, but through illumination. The world learned from this culture that advancement does not result from power, but from knowledge. That greatness is not in domination, but in inspiring minds. The teachings of Islam provided humanity with a new vision that religion and knowledge combined could create a world of harmony, justice, and beauty. Even now, the legacy of that golden era echoes down through the ages, telling us that if hearts are guided by faith and minds by knowledge, humanity is at its best. Justice, the unshakable conviction that truth and fairness are the pillars of society, is the core of any great civilization. In Islamic history, justice was not just a code of laws. It was a moral and spiritual obligation, a principle that guided all facets of life. It was the understanding that all human beings, irrespective of their birth, wealth, or rank, have inalienable dignity and rights. This maxim, which was revolutionary during its era, became the foundation of a lasting civilization. Before the world knew the term equality, Islam taught that no one is superior to another save by righteousness and character. Islam challenged the traditional hierarchies of the tribes, social classes, and sexism, demanding that merit and virtue, not birth or power, prevail over honor and respect. The authority of a ruler was never absolute. It was checked by accountability, moral governance, and the quest for justice for all. The principles of Islam went beyond the limits of words to the entire fabric of society. Courts were created to safeguard the law impartially, guaranteeing that the weak were shielded and the oppressed were able to find recourse. Judges were appointed based on their integrity, scholars with moral firmness guiding them, and communities entreated to act with benevolence. Punishment was never capricious. It was a controlled response intended to establish justice, teach accountability, and safeguard society. The rule was simple. Justice had to be unbiased, even at the expense of the mighty, and mercy go hand in hand with toughness. Equality was also rooted in economic and social structures. Wealth was not a test of merit. Charity and care for the weak were responsibilities. Inheritance laws, equitable trade, and social welfare guaranteed that no one was left poor or voiceless. Slavery was over time reformed, and the treatment of children, minorities, and women showed an adherence to justice of a type that the world rarely saw in those days. All actions from government to everyday behavior were to express the divine mandate that all human beings belong to one equal family. This sense of justice and fairness did more than enact laws. It generated trust, harmony, and collaboration. Societies flourished because individuals understood their rights were safeguarded and responsibilities were mutual. Rulers governed not through fear, but through respect, garnering loyalty through justice instead of force. Social cohesion was not by chance. It was purposeful, led by the timeless ideals of moral distinctiveness, empathy, and fairness. In addition, justice and equality were not limited by borders or a people. Islamic civilization urged just treatment of non-Muslims, travelers, and neighbors. Peace agreements, commercial agreements, and multi-faith cities showed a civilization that grasped the power of equity and the strength of inclusion. It showed the world that a society based on justice is powerful, robust, and long-lasting. The history of Islam has a lesson that transcends all time. Greatness is not in terms of riches or conquest, but in how fairly and equally individuals are treated. It warns us that there can be no society that thrives without fairness, no community that can survive without equality, and no religion that is whole without justice. The light of justice and equality continues to be a beacon, a legacy that challenges each new generation to respect truth, to protect the weak, and to always treat humanity with dignity. The history of Islam is not just one of belief and learning, but also one of culture, of living together, and of spreading peace. In contrast to conquest-based civilizations, Islam expanded not by coercion, but by the power of character, virtue, and cultural superiority. Wherever its teachings penetrated, they imparted a sense of unity, stability, and efflorescence in the arts, sciences, and human discourse. This expansion forged links between peoples, saved knowledge, and bequeathed a legacy that is felt to the present day. From the Arabian heartland, Islam spread over deserts, rivers, and mountains to reach lands as varied as Persia, India, North Africa, and Spain. Everywhere, it enveloped the local culture with values that encouraged harmony, justice, and spiritual enlightenment. Cities became hotspots of education and culture where scholars, poets, craftsmen, and architects collaborated to produce societies that were lively, cosmopolitan, and progressive. The mosque was not just a center of worship, but also a center of learning, discussion, and social service, an emblem of the equilibrium of spirituality and civilization. Islam's spread of culture led to an unprecedented bloom of art, architecture, and literature. Grand mosques, palaces, and libraries were built, decorated with elaborate calligraphy, geometric designs, and gardens meant to mirror divine order and beauty. Literature also flourished in various tongues, from Persian epics to Arabic poetry, covering themes of love, wisdom, and devotion. Music, narrative, and philosophical discourse were admired as manifestations of the human condition, motivated by the ideals of faith, harmony, and beauty. Peace was the foundation of this cultural spread. Islam promoted living with non-Muslims, tolerating their ways, religions, and rights. Trade flourished because promises were kept and contracts upheld with integrity. Diplomatic envoys, treaties, and alliances indicated a culture that prized words over weapons. The expansion of Islam was thus a cultural revolution and not a simple military one, showing that real influence is born out of respect, ethics, and common human values. Learning and the exchange of ideas were at the heart of this expansion. Students came from far-off lands to learn, instruct, and dispute, establishing a world system of information. Hospitals, universities, and libraries catered to individuals regardless of background, promoting innovation and creativity. This interchange of cultures kept alive the old knowledge from Greece, Rome, Persia, and India, as well as developing new findings in science, medicine, astronomy, and philosophy. The growth of Islam was, in fact, growth of civilization itself, a process that brought humanity up with education, justice, and beauty. Finally, the spread of peace and culture with Islam left a legacy that extended beyond borders and centuries. It taught the world that religion does not have to be forced upon them, but can change hearts, societies, and civilizations through wisdom, justice, and creativity. It proved that greatness lies not in conquest, but in tending knowledge, beauty, harmony, and respect for all. The tale of this expansion also reminds us that peace and culture go hand in hand, and that a nation founded on faith, knowledge, and compassion can move the world far beyond its borders. It's an eternal message that our advance is not measured in territory, but in the light we shed on people's hearts and minds everywhere. The history of Islam is not just a history book from the past. It is a living heritage, an influence that still molds the hearts, minds, and societies of millions of people worldwide. From the initial revelation to the age of the sciences, from the spread of justice to the bloom of cultures, each page of Islamic history bears lessons that go beyond time and boundaries. Its legacy is not inscribed solely in monuments or manuscripts, but in the abiding principles that still lead humanity towards enlightenment, compassion, and unity. One of the truly remarkable aspects of this legacy is its agelessness. The tenets of faith, justice, knowledge, and morality are just as relevant today as they were more than 1,000 years ago. In a time of turmoil and rapid change, the precepts of Islam are a lodestar, reminding people in society that success is not defined by the accumulation of riches or the possession of power, but by wisdom, integrity, and the goodness one spreads in the world. It asks mankind to inquire, to act in fairness, and to foster kindness in all that it does. The legacy of Islam further rests in its contribution to world civilization. Its thinkers saved the wisdom of earlier civilizations, developed sciences, and established systems of learning that provided the underpinning of contemporary thought. Its builders and designers left behind beauty that remains a source of awe. Its thinkers, jurists, and educators fashion moral and ethical principles that govern behavior today. These gifts are not remnants of a past age. They are dynamic forces that serve as a reminder to the world of the strength of a civilization founded on knowledge, religion, and principle. In addition to intellectual and cultural attainments, Islam's most valuable legacy is the moral and spiritual renewal it inspires. Its precepts promote self-discipline, responsibility, and introspection. Its record indicates that leadership does not entail domination but service. That advancement is not conquest but elevation. That humanity is at its best when justice, compassion, and equality are the precepts guiding society. Oh, Raganda. These teachings are timeless, transmitted through generations, spoken in the Adhan, inscribed in books, and embodied in the life of those who seek to abide by them. In addition, Islam's legacy is one of perseverance in the face of adversity. Through centuries, its adherents have been subjected to challenges ranging from social resistance to political turmoil, yet they maintain the ideals of knowledge, justice, and mercy. This perseverance attests to the fact that a civilization based on belief and principle is not extinguished. Rather, it transforms, evolves, and endures to provide inspiration even in the darkest of times. It reminds people that the test of greatness is not fleeting power, but enduring impact. Lastly, Islam's past is also a call to action for the coming generations. It is a call to respect the past not with passive remembrance, but by living its values in daily life. Through pursuing knowledge, encouraging justice, developing compassion, and establishing societies based on moral clarity, the legacy of Islam continues. And every learned scholar, every leader, every individual who decides to light up the world with wisdom, courage, and integrity. In reality, the rich history of Islam is a beacon glows for centuries, recalling humanity that the confluence of religion, knowledge, justice, and culture gives rise to a civilization that will outlast time. A civilization whose legacy is timeless, whose lessons are universal, and whose inspiration will remain to lead generations yet to come.